survivors, and welcome to First Aid Spray, a Resident Evil podcast by fans for fans. This is episode 93 of the show, and in this edition we're teaming up to fight Bioterror in the Big Apple in our review of Resident Evil Vendetta. My name is Sai, and joining me on the panel this week, falling to his knees and yelling "No!" into the sky, it's Fire Button Steve Valance.
No! Hi, everybody.
And also falling to his knees and yelling "No!" into the sky just 2 minutes later, it's James, aka Moist Owlet.
I'm doing 2 thumbs up.
And our special guest this week, rising from the dead only to be greeted with more Resident Evil movies to talk about, which might be the ultimate reason to fall to your knees and yell "No" to the sky. For the first time in over 3 years, it's boy wonder Adam Russell Reeves.
Kill me! For making me watch this movie.
Every episode of First Aid Spray is recorded live on Discord, so join our server now to become part of our fantastic community that includes Resident Evil diehards and newbies. If you like, you can support the show via our merchandise store or over at patreon.com/FASprayPod for as little as $1 a month. All of this and all of our social media links, as always, can be found at our website, faspraypod.com. Shout out to our latest Patreon supporter, Anon Persona. Thank you for supporting First Aid Spray. Thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for supporting First Aid Spray. They recently got access to a new episode of A Moment of Relief, which we titled "Is Next Gen Gaming Dead?", which was quite a long discussion about the origin of the term next gen, what it means now, and where we go moving forward. James Kelsey and I really got into the weeds of gaming and the state of the industry, which was actually a really fun time. Meanwhile, we do have some new content for everyone. We don't have some. I have some new content for everyone that I'm going to plug on the show. But there is a link to it on faspraypod.com to the latest What Culture Gaming Resident Evil piece. Lots of subjects that we've covered before on the podcast kind of bundled together into a 25-minute mini documentary called The Untold History of Resident Evil, or How Capcom Nearly Killed Resident Evil. And it's about all the choices along the way that nearly put the kibosh on our beloved series at some of its most crucial moments. It was a big labour of love, so hence the plug. But being that you're all Resident Evil fans listening to this, you'll probably get a kick out of it. So yes, it is over on the What Culture Gaming YouTube channel, and it's over on the First Aid Spray website as well. That's everything from us. Steve, why don't you take us into a rather major, it's about damn time, headline.
You're making it sound like we're getting a really big revelation. Okay.
Compared to sales numbers, this is something.
Big news.
The new Resident Evil motion picture is official.
It is happening. Many rumours and discussions about this for a while now, but as per the Hollywood Reporter and various other places, there is a new script in the works, shopping around now for studios. This is going to be directed and written by Zach Cregger, sorry. Most known for Barbarian, which was a bit of an indie horror flick, and by all accounts quite good from what I hear. If you look at the trailer, it definitely has kind of an RE7 vibe. And Shay Hatton is signed on to co-write, who worked on the John Wick films, if nothing else, which is hilariously relevant to what we're going to be talking about when we get to the sort of bulk of this episode. But yes, it is apparently going to be produced by Constantine, unsurprisingly, alongside PlayStation Studios, which again, kind of makes sense. That's the follow-on from Sony Studios. It's a kind of a new wing of that, and they are looking for new projects, so it makes sense. But I guess the most important, most interesting thing here is that 4 studios are elbowing for the game, apparently, or for the film, sorry. Among them is Warner Brothers and Netflix, which is really interesting. What this film is, we have no idea yet. It's very early doors, but I can just assume that this is not a Welcome to Raccoon City sequel. This is yet another reboot, it seems. Steve, any thoughts on this?
I just hope to not hear 4 words. My name is Alice.
Oh, God.
I know that the rumours and that are reboot, but I don't know. When I hear the words Constantine film, I'm immediately... Yeah.
Yes, the question is, what are they rebooting exactly?
Yeah, they're just redoing it again. Look, here's Mia. She's back.
Yeah, maybe so.
Honestly, my hopes are pretty low because I haven't seen anything that these two people have produced. not yet. Like I say, I've heard Barbarian is good, but that, someone can make a masterpiece and then still make complete toilet. See, like any famous celebrity director ever, except maybe Tarantino. But then again, Hateful Eight was a bit, the point is, I am whelmed until I see a trailer.
Yes, and I imagine we are a ways off yet, since the script is either that's as far as we've gotten, or maybe that's not even done yet. We don't know for certain. So this is going to be quite a bit away yet. But James, any feelings on the early rumblings of this?
I don't like. I said it in the Discord server, but I don't like it that. By the way, just before I say this, Barbarian is a fantastic movie, and I love that movie. I've watched it a few times now. Absolutely adore it. But we've also had superstar writers, directors on previous Resident Evil stuff, and it hasn't gone anywhere. I feel like Constantine film only ever put these superstar people, these names ahead, because it's like, here's the big name, but actually we're going to be controlling what's actually happening.
Well, sure.
And I think that sucks, because I think you should let writers/directors/ screenplayers, write and do what they want to do, because that's why you brought them on. So let them do their thing. We've only heard that. We've heard that like dreaded thing, like going back to its roots, which is always annoying to hear. A new original story. That's the other one I don't want to hear. Don't do it. Don't do it, Capcom. But yeah, I am just the same as Steve. I am whelmed. I'm not too fussed about it right now. I expect we'll probably hear news maybe the end of this year.
Maybe.
Maybe middle of next year, like for definite. Like if anything is going to happen.
I have no idea. Obviously, filmmaking can be a process which takes... there's a huge variance in the time that it takes to get something off the ground and produced and whatever. It's been a couple of years since Welcome to Raccoon City now. So if this was a case of, it's been a few years, we have nothing, let's quickly do something to keep the rights again. It feels a little bit early for that, but they may be getting ahead of the situation in that case.
Definitely. I definitely don't want to happen what happened last time we had this, which is leaks being leaked and everyone losing their mind over it. Yeah. Because people just made up their minds before even watching it. No matter what it was, whether it be Welcome to Raccoon City or My Beloved NRE.
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah, it's like, just let it come out. This goes for a lot of things. Just let it come out, then make your opinions known.
Yeah, and unfortunately it does have an uphill battle to fight, I guess, because of the long history of Resident Evil adaptations, which have been middling to terrible. And to your point, what you said earlier about superstar directors and stuff, do you remember early days of Welcome to Raccoon City? James Wan was attached to that.
Yeah.
He dipped from it. So who knows what state this film is going to end up in from this first announcement to the release. Zach Cregger might get sick of studio meddling or whatever else and might pass on it and might go to someone else. We have no idea what this is going to be, but welcome back, Adam, to First Aid Spray. You were last seen, in fact, on the Welcome to Raccoon City podcast, so I apologise to bring you in to talk all about the Resident Evil movies. That was not necessarily intentional, but how are you feeling about this announcement?
They say, what's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And that's kind of how I feel about Resident Evil, the cinematic universe. So let's just let it happen and deal with it when it happens, It's like
with it.
PTSD or something at this point with these movies. So, let's be open-minded. Barbarian is a really good movie. The problem being is that Barbarian is not an IP. Barbarian was something he was able just to do. That was his thing. This is a very different beast entirely. We have not only a movie studio involved, but we have Capcom themselves. So everyone sort of has their hands in it when it comes to Resident Evil, and I think that's where we've always struggled with Resident Evil. Is there's so many people with their hands in the pie that it becomes a bit of a mess. So that's my fear, regardless of who directs it. they're still beholden to the whims of the studios. So I hope that it's good, but I can't imagine it.
Really, really good point. I know that when we had the special effects director on to talk about the Netflix Resident Evil series, he pointed out that the movie was... The Capcom were not really involved in the show. They were far more interested in meddling, if you like, in the movie, if you want to call it that. So this certainly worry that is an aspect here as well. I mean, I do wonder in the sense that we are now in a post-Fallout and The Last of Us, etc. world, and the Mario Brothers movie as well, and the Sonic movies to a certain extent, where we have evidence to show that, hey, actually doing something closer to the games seems to work. Who'd have thought? But then again, Constantine, in their eyes, I guess, tried that with Welcome to Raccoon City, and it didn't do very well financially. Nor did
I would argue
well in terms of the reviews.
Sorry. I would argue that the reason that there is a bidding war is because the Paul W.S. Anderson movies made so much money.
Mm-hmm.
Which is crazy to think about, but they made so much money. And, the studio's going to want that again, because that's really the bottom line is money. They're not making a Resident Evil film for all of us Resident Evil fans. They're making a Resident Evil film because they feel there's a market there. But they're really, I think the reason that so many studios are bidding on it is because they see the numbers from those previous Resident Evil films. And they're like, well, we want a slice of that pie.
Yes, and to circle back to the earlier point, I think it's very evident that Welcome to Raccoon City was an exercise in just keeping hold of the IP and just keeping that copyright safe. Like, it came together so quickly, and Sony, we talked about this before, literally put it out it felt like it was, we're releasing this for a week, but you can only go and see it at 1 a.m. It was like, it was not showing anywhere. They released it between Spider-Man and the new Ghostbusters film in December. It had a very short, cinema run. Like, it was just set up to fail. Maybe you're right this time. Maybe this is like they're making we'll see, but maybe this is them making an actual go of it, putting some budget in. In terms of content then, I hadn't considered it, Steve, but you might be right. Their idea of a, quote, reboot might be of the original film series more than anything to do with the games. But it's very, very early to tell.
If you ever saw that film Inside by Disney, you just smash cut to inside my head and it's just screaming. Just on loop. That one sentence.
On that note then, let's talk about our Resident Evil movie in great detail as we review Resident Evil Vendetta. And now, reading the file Suicide Notes from Resident Evil 2002, Kuro VA, who you can follow on Twitter at KuroVA132.
June 22nd, 1998. I had to do it. We ran from those things, helping each other to survive. But Robert started to show the symptoms. I had to do it. Those damn things are pure evil. There was no other way. He would have done the same if it were the other way around. After I put him out of his misery, I just had to put him in the bathroom. Now I'm probably the last one. How could this happen? I'll never forgive myself for being a part of this project. Eventually I'll get what's coming to me, though. There's no way to escape from this nut house. It's just a matter of time now. Everything is set. All I need is a little courage to get it done. Knowing that I'll leave many things undone is regret beyond words. But this is better than just waiting to turn into one of them. Please understand, and at least let me end my life as a person. Linda, please forgive me.
Welcome back to Film Club, everyone. This is maybe the final edition for quite a while now, or at least until we get this fabled Resident Evil new movie, or maybe we'll do an episode on the 20-minute short. What the hell was that thing called, Steve? I can't even remember.
Biohazard 4D Executor, and it's fantastic, and it's probably going to be the best one we watch. Just saying. Hands on cards and tables and stuff.
Completely left my brain. That's how important it is. I don't know if we can get a whole episode out of a 20-minute, but we'll get a whole episode out of Vendetta at least, because it's the last CGI feature-length Resident Evil film that we've yet to cover. It's the first to be made by Masa Animation Planet, which is one of Japan's oldest animation studios, owned by Sega. And interestingly, it's the only Resident Evil CGI production that's credited to Masa, because Infinite Darkness and Death Island are credited to their parent company, TMS. It's all under the same umbrella, pun intended, but all the same, I thought it was an interesting fact. In terms of the production of this film, the film producers wanted to use Chris as the lead character, but of course, Kobayashi said, no, you have to use Leon, my best boy. But he did also offer up the idea of Rebecca Chambers, and I guess they all kind of came to an agreement therein. But, for what it's worth, I suppose that is one of the most memorable things about this particular entry in the film series, if nothing else. Strangely, the term reboot was also thrown around during early publicity of this movie. To what extent Capcom meant that, I don't understand, or to this day, I'm not really sure what they're getting at there. But all the same, the movie was released on May 27th, 2017, which was 4 months after RE7, so it felt very strange at the time to be going back to something that was, I guess, RE6 coded, to be quite honest. And with these classic characters, when RE7 made such an effort to do its own soft reboot and introduce its own cast and kind of keep away from the core Resident Evil story just for that moment. It's the only Resident Evil CGI picture to receive a limited cinema run in the UK and in the US. It made a total of $1.6 million worldwide in that sense, and then home video earned around the same amount of money in terms of Blu-ray purchases in the US, so not a huge amount of money, and it has a Rotten Tomato score of about 43%, and of course it does have a direct sequel in Death Island, which we have discussed when it came out. Let's talk about our earliest memories of Vendetta. Did we all see it at the time? Adam, do you have previous experience watching Vendetta, or is this your first time getting through it?
No, this is my first time. I watched it a couple times knowing that we were going to be talking about it, but I hadn't watched it before then. I think I'd only ever watched, honestly, whichever the first CG movie was.
Degeneration.
Yeah. Degeneration, yeah. And that was kind of enough for me, honestly. Like, we'll get into why, but it's not that. Going from this one as well, I don't think it's anything that really like blew me away, but we will get into it obviously. But yeah, this was kind of like the first few times I've watched the movie.
James, I guess this isn't your first time watching the movie, but this, you hadn't seen it before First Aid Spray. But what are you up to, like 4 or something now? You said 4 watches.
Oh no, actually, maybe surprising everybody. Vendetta is I think the CGI RE film I've seen the most. Notwithstanding the 4 I just watched for this podcast.
Oh, goodness.
Because the first time, I think, Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the first time I watched this was at Steve's house.
Yeah, for the Rebecca Chambers part. Yeah, we watched it then.
I watched it for the Rebecca profile, and I also watched it before that too, because I really like Rebecca, so why wouldn't I watch this film? But I would only replay the sections where Rebecca was, because they're the best sections of this game. I mean, this movie. And I've watched it quite a few times. Yeah, I did, because I put like late 2010s. Yeah, it was like 2018, 2019 where I watched it the first time. So not on release, but soon after.
Mm-hmm. Steve, do you remember watching Vendetta when it was brand new?
I want to say it was around release, yeah. Like, I was, RE7's mint, Resident Evil's good again. I bet this film will be. I don't know, the trailers are a bit. I'll give it a go anyway. And then that's how that happened. Yeah, it was around launch. I want to say I didn't see it at the cinema, but I could be wrong. Memories are hazy like that. I definitely had the physical, the second it went and hit physical and digital to buy, I had it then.
Nice. Yes, I should probably scoop these things up. I only have Degeneration, I think, physically speaking, but I watched it maybe a year or 2 after release. It certainly wasn't right away. RE7 stoked the flame, but I wasn't ready to jump into the CGI stuff from my previous recollections of Degeneration and Damnation. And I remember trying to watch all three, not in a day. I think I did one at a time, day to day, and by the end was kind of burnt out. And didn't really enjoy Vendetta on the first watch through, but I've seen it multiple times since then, as James has pointed out, for various podcasts, doing a little bit of research. But this is the first time that we'll be just solo talking about the movie itself, and we'll see how my opinion has changed, I guess. So let's just give a little bit of a little bit of the story synopsis, but essentially the synopsis that I've written down is the first hour. But yes, this film is set in 2014, so 2 years after Resident Evil 6. Chris is tracking a CIA operative turned arms dealer, Glenn Arias, who is seeking revenge on the government for dropping an airstrike on his wedding, as you do.
Sorry.
He's developed a new virus, the A virus, which stands for animality, apparently, and kills a BSAA undercover source in front of Chris, and also displays that his BOWs are able to target specific enemies and not attack their allies. 4 months later, Rebecca Chambers, who is working out of a Chicago university, is researching the virus and various outbreaks around the Great Lakes and creates a vaccine. Rebecca suggests that her and Chris track down Leon, who has previous experience with Las Plagas, which has behavior similar to the one the virus displays, to help them. Rebecca is then kidnapped and taken to Arias' headquarters in New York City, and Chris and Leon race off to save her. As I say, that's pretty much the first hour of the movie, because I guess there is a decent amount of story, question mark, if you want to call it a story, in that first bit, and then the last bit is the last bit. But let's talk about the setup to the film and the intro in particular. I remember the marketing for this film. And in fact, there is a poster that is just like Chris in front of that mansion at the beginning, showing off the stuff in the same way that Death Island, showed off Jill investigating the dark home at the beginning, and it kind of just being a scene. Adam, how did you feel about the setup to Vendetta?
It's weird, man. Like, it's just kind of like, throughout most of the film, like, let alone the setup, I didn't really understand, like, motivations in the movie. So, like, I get that President Obama did a drone strike. In 2014, he was the president, so it was one of Obama's classic drone strikes on a wedding, which was just wild. I think I laughed out loud when that happened. But really, this sounds like such a weird negative to have, but it felt like this is just Resident Evil. And that may need a little qualification because we all love Resident Evil, but it's like, it feels like the setup is not trying anything new, It's just like, this is what Resident Evil is pretty much, it's like, I don't know what version of Wesker we're on right now, but he's, the villain is essentially Wesker 2.0, 3.0, whatever you want. It's like a carbon copy almost. And then, all of the characters are essentially the characters that we know and love. They all have the same emotions that we expect from them, essentially. So for me, like, and I think the first 30 minutes, I think I wrote down, like, is anyone going to, like, talk in this movie? Because, like, no one really, like, there's such a lack of dialogue in like, the first half an hour. I didn't really know what was going to happen because, like, they weren't telling me.
That is actually something I will admit that I've had a bit of an issue with this film, and I do actually think, for what it's worth, it's a good thing to point to when people say Resident Evil should just be someone creeping around in a dark, scary house. And it's like, I don't know if that works as a movie. You do need to have characters talking just to keep audiences engaged, because I'm very guilty of kind of like realizing I'm not paying attention and I'm thinking about something else during this segment in particular. It wouldn't be the first time for me to have wound it back and watched it again to make sure I was actually paying attention. So I kind of get what you're getting at there. And I definitely get what you're getting at in terms of it being like a bit of a Resident Evil ticking boxes exercise with spooky house. And I completely forgot that we have the laser grid homage at the beginning of this.
Oh my God.
Capcom just can't they can't help themselves now. It's just mental. I was like, oh yeah, so we have this in 4 things at this point. I forgot that. Yeah, I forgot about it.
Yeah, that was ridiculous. Like, and how many people can you fit under a bed? That scene, there's like 6 people. Like, there's some noise under the bed. You look under the bed. There's a dude under the bed being eaten by 2 zombies under a bed. Then 2 more zombies come out from behind the headboard of the bed. So there's 6 like people or something under the bed. Then someone else gets pulled under the bed while there's a bunch of people under the bed. It's like, what's it? It's under the bed, man. I don't even know.
There's a little pocket dimension in there.
Yeah, right. And then there's that weird like crawler zombie with like an exposed spinal cord that has independent movement and glorious, beautiful hair, much like you, Sai.
Thank you.
And they're all, and that thing's like zipping around, and that's not explained. And yeah, then there's a corridor just full of very sharp wire for no seeming reason. It's just, I don't even know.
Arias
and the mansion, like when they
smiling.
When they first walk into the mansion, it's like Spencer Mansion, like the staircase.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
To the point where I was just like, wait, am I not following because it's like Mexico or something? And again, it's just like the trope of Resident Evil now. Like you say, you've got a freaking laser / wire thing. You've got someone, a zombie always turns their head to the camera. You've got freaking mansion like these mansions in the middle of the woods where no one else is around. I've never seen that in real life, but it's just a Resident Evil thing now. Like, where are we going to build this mansion? Just in the middle of the woods. There's no stores nearby. There's no roads going up to it, so you can't.
There's no road to the house.
Yeah, it's just like it's just
drive
there.
A quad bike up to the front door.
It's like that.
James, how
I don't
do
know
you feel
if
about
anyone's played or seen that mini horror game, The Cabin Factory. I feel like there could be a DLC just called The Spencer Factory, where it's just a big production row of these freaking mansions going by. Is it filled with zombies? Yeah, okay, send it out.
James, how did you feel about the intro to Vendetta?
I'm going to be a bit more positive. As I said at the beginning before recording, that it took me about 3 days to write these notes because I would just rant and rant and rant. And then I had to kind of like squeeze and compress everything down. So yeah, like, first of all, it's kind of, it is impossible not to notice the callback to Resi 1. It's a very eerie mansion setting. There's a doomed team that's sent in his cannon fodder. Even the forest scene, it's like the opening cinematic at the beginning of the game. I think, and I'm putting this, I'm being very generous. It's a good nod to RE1. Like, even the short scene before this with Leon and the body bags, it reminded me of RE4, which was nice to see. It was nice, but I hate Leon, so. I also hate Chris, so 75% of this movie is crap to me. Yeah, like the Mexico mansion, which is where this is set, it was like it's a shadow of the Spencer one, though. Like, it would have been nice if they just planted a puzzle here or there, not a bloody cheese wire corridor. Like the creepy ambience was nice. It kind of reminded me of the beginning of Death Island a bit.
Yeah.
And there was a really cool shot of Zach, which was Kathy's, who, you don't know who she is? Yeah, we don't know who she is either. She was shown on a JPEG of an iPad, and then we were supposed to give a crap about her. But yeah, we had that shot of Zach, her kid, behind a wardrobe, which did look like something that was straight ripped from a game, like a Resi game, which was cool. However, I'm not sure why he replied "yeah" when Chris called his name. That was weird.
Yeah, it was weird, wasn't it?
Yeah. Like, okay. That was very odd.
Popped out from behind the like the wardrobe or whatever. Chris doesn't say anything, and the 2 soldiers, they don't say a single word to this kid. They just stare at the kid until he destroys them.
Yep. Yeah. It's so weird. Like, there is. I'm gonna come to bat a little bit because I do have bias here, but the one thing I did love was that femme torso monster zombie thing. as it reminded me of a monster I'd made in a TTRPG that was inspired by Southeast Asian folklore. They, for some reason, they absolutely love femme figures being ripped in half and then them just floating and moving around. I'm not sure why, but I'll talk about that a bit more later in BOW stuff. I think all they needed to do a little bit was just, you've got all your kind of your hit moments, like kind of like buzz actions for Resident Evil. But it would have been nice for a bit of history about the mansion, why Glenn chose it, its significance other than just nostalgia bait, because that's all it felt like.
Yeah.
Because after this introduction, it was never spoken of again, So it just would have been nice for more.
It's not really relevant to anything, is it? It's just kind of setting up Glenn and as a Chris's new arch nemesis that they tried to do, as Adam has rightly said. They really wanted him to be Wesker in this, and they really wanted him to be a parallel to Chris, because as we've already alluded to as well, even in the intros, my most memorable thing about this movie is it's never not funny to me that both of them go, no! Like 20 minutes of the film, we get one of those and we get another one like 2 minutes later. And it's so dumb. And it feels
because
like
really deep down, they're the same person, man.
Well, exactly. That is clearly what they're going for, because if that's not what they're going for, then they just didn't watch the movie back and be like, oh, this is kind of dumb. No, they thought that was really clever, and it's not. It's so stupid. Steve, what did you make of the intro of Vendetta?
I think the words nostalgia bait are very, very much on point. As much as I was like, all for it. Like, if they made RE1 and changed the setting to present day, a cheese wire death trap hallway is going to be something they would put in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like the fact that we've got a murder torso that is spec'd in agility specifically. Can take out 3 dudes in like a finger snap. Kind of cool. Hate zombie children. Hate the way his jaw looks. Swear I'm from a different universe. I just one of the words he said was hi, not yeah. But that's by the by. Generally speaking, I didn't hate it. I like the little fist fight between... I say fist fight. It's more disarmed gun beats man with knife fight between Chris and Arias. He literally is just, let's give Wesker some like grey hair and a different suit, but kind of a slightly more insane demeanor, which I'm okay with. But yeah, Sai's right. It literally is. You have Chris screaming as a mansion explodes behind him, followed by title card. Then after the title card, it's literally Glenn's wedding. But for some reason, Chris screaming doesn't make me laugh, but Glenn's does. Like he's he's holding his dead wife's arm and he's going ah, and I was like ah! It's awful. But I generally enjoyed the homage. It literally is like going to find missing people. We find a mansion. Team gets wiped out. You could just take the cliff notes from this and go, that's just RE1, isn't it? Again, you just literally copied your notes from class. Mm-hmm. But that said, it has redeeming qualities compared to what comes later.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I think the one thing, and I think this more comes from the sort of scenes that follow, maybe with Rebecca. I can't recall, but there's mention of a leak in the WHO, which I thought was quite interesting and has some Revelations vibes to it. But it's not really given much focus. It's just kind of used as a justification to set up a series of events that obviously then set up a series of action set pieces. But, I thought it was really interesting considering Revelations and also the future of the series, which we hadn't necessarily arrived at totally at this point. And there's a couple of those in that they're like, that's interesting. This might be a theme going on here. In fact, I guess we're just going to move on to the next section. So it's about that moment. But there's some stuff in here that's like, oh, cool. You're actually kind of paying attention to... You could argue, I would say, that you're paying attention to Resident Evil. Whereas Degeneration and Damnation, to me, felt kind of disconnected. There's a bunch of stuff in here where you're like, okay, you're mentioning leaks within the WHO. There's a reference to Plagas. They talk about Tricell and Neo Umbrella, which was kind of nice to hear in something other than RE6, even if I think Neo Umbrella is really dumb. And yeah, Rebecca saying corporations run by scum is a great potential accidental foreshadowing for the fact that we'd potentially have a corrupt BSAA story in Resident Evil 9. It was not meant that way, but it's kind of cool in retrospect. That stuff's nice, But then again, like the first bit, you could just say, hey, we're saying Resident Evil words. That makes us cool. I don't know. I don't know how everyone feels about that. But let's get into, I guess, the bulk of the story from here. James, how do you feel about, where we go from here, I guess?
Okay. This story can be completely compounded down to US does questionable drone strike, CIA man gets revenge. That's it. And the rest of the movie is just like these steps to get to that's kind of ridiculous. Like, and the movie is expecting you to fill in like a wide array of gaps or just foregoing them altogether, like as you're watching. Like, I mean, one in particular, I love Rebecca Chambers, but for plot reasons, she somehow manages to resist the gas inside this lab 10 times longer than anyone else. Mm-hmm. Like before she gets like the very plot convenient vaccine she made. You know, there's no mention of her. Like they could have easily, you know, these are just small things, but these small things make a movie, you know, like she could have quickly mentioned that she made a booster on herself or something similar that fixed, you know, that would have fixed this. Like, but she survived because she's got main character syndrome. And like, without sounding like a broken record, this happens so many times throughout this film. Chris gets thrown about 100 feet into a brick wall about 5 times, you know, and there's just no thought really for the writing and the whys. Like, in games, all this stuff is kind of explained to us in notes, but we never got that kind of exposition here. Just the cliff notes, or not even that. Another like really egregious part was Chris minimizes Rebecca by saying they need a real expert, like, who by the way is Leon. You know, then it turns out that Rebecca had the solution all along, and Leon is made completely redundant for the entire movie, other than to look cool and being a little brood off with Chris. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, I had tons of these little pointless adages that I put down in notes, but literally I'll be here all day. Like, they just make sense. They make no sense of why they would happen. The writing of this story is plain doo-doo, with like all the gravitas, but like no substance. You know, when it comes to the story, it's like they wanted to make this amazing story. Like, but they just didn't want to fill in the gaps with anything. They just expected you to try and fill that in yourself without nothing. Nothing was explained. It's big poo-poo.
Stuff that is explained as well is explained poorly at times, I think. Yeah. The idea that Rebecca claims to create a vaccine for a virus that she has also claimed exists latently within everyone, or, you know, as standard, as a human.
Yeah.
Which seems like playing with biology in quite an extreme way to me, but I'm pretty sure she means, oh, this can stop the trigger virus that sets off the rest of it. It's an overly complicated virus considering it's an hour-and-a-half movie, but whatever.
Is that a mistranslation, do you think?
Bad localization. Yeah. But yeah, it's really weird that she says, so yeah, this virus, actually everyone in the world is infected with this, and this thing sets it off and turns you into a zombie or whatever. But don't worry, I can cure the virus. And I'm like, wait, what? You what? You're playing God here, aren't we? And absolutely, to your credit, they rope Leon in because they need him for his Plagas knowledge, and then it never comes up again. The film has nothing to do with the fact that he has Plagas knowledge. The film has infinitely more to do with look how cool Leon looks in slow motion and on a bike. Steve, what did you think of the sort of, I guess we'll talk about sort of the mid part of the story before we get to New York.
See, I like the actual university sequence, mainly because for some reason Biohazard Stage comes to mind, but it's more localized to just Rebecca surviving it. I do think the Deus Ex Rebecca survival stuff is nonsense. Granted, right, okay. But they could have easily used some kind of different way of pathogening it. I felt actually kind of bad for her colleague Aaron, because they were like, some kind of a bit of flirting going on, and then all of a sudden, next snap now is a really, really groovy ghoul.
Big Dom energy from Rebecca Chambers.
Yeah. You know, I'm postdoc. I don't do that. And then she just goes, For the listeners' benefit, I'm tilting my glasses. I thought that was kind of fun, and then he died. The bit with Leon straight after this, where we need to get an expert, kind of rote, isn't it? Leon's literally just being, I'm miserable and sad because I lost my team. I'm playing Chris's role from RE6, but Leon style. And he's so cool, he has a whiskey bottle. And then some dude, who I cannot remember the name of, who betrayed him earlier before the film began, goes, save my family! And no any indication as to what happens to that man's family after the events of the main big bad gets dealt with. Kind of rote. We see Arias ponder and be all broody, trying to assert that he's not insane when it's very clear he absolutely is. And Diego's there with a minigun. Hooray! It starts to go a bit off the rails rapidly. The university sequence with Rebecca skulking around trying to survive was kind of neat, though. I would argue that bit itself had tension, had pause. If I want to get all tinfoil hat as to how she survived, geez, I don't want to go into the weeds, but she did one time get swiped by an eliminator in Resident Evil 0, and then this is where you just tuned me out and faded me outside.
That sounds like extra work. I don't know.
But no, generally speaking, I like Chris has got his own little XCOM crew with unique characters whose names I cannot remember, but they've mentioned Breaking Bad, so therefore they're okay. And and then Rebecca got kidnapped. Oh no.
The Breaking Bad reference is incredibly forced, but I do kind of appreciate it as a nod to the show that referenced Resident Evil 4 at one point. It's very clearly a thanks for the mention. Now we're responding in kind, which is kind of cute. But if you don't know that, it's what the hell was what? You could be explaining the virus a lot better instead of talking about how game-changing Breaking Bad is. But okay, fair enough. And dating the movie. Thanks. Okay, fair enough. Adam, what did you make of the sort of the middle part of the film?
It was rough, man. I'm not gonna beat around the bush. It was pretty rough. And for a lot of the reasons that have kind of been explained before, but Rebecca Chambers, essentially being directly under a vent, staring up into it. She's watching the gas come out. Oh my God, it's happening. And then living for you have time to go and inoculate herself with her magic, vaccine. Was it explained how she made the vaccine? I don't remember, but I was this seems
Not really. They're just
they've just worked out that there's all these different components to this one, and yet she's just yeah, I made a vaccine. You're oh, okay. Good. Right. So let's just give that to everyone, and we're good.
She goes through this really short, pseudoscience buzzword phase, talking to Aaron about what she did, but not really thoroughly explained.
Actually, I do have a note on it, so it does make sense. She said they were talking about how it's being kept quiet and covered up. But then she says that there's been 20 recorded attacks, right? So that's a lot of... And they show CCTV footage of, zombies attacking someone on the street. And that's that's a lot of attacks for it to be covered up. And then the dude says, yeah, we've got another lot of affected bodies for you to look at. Over 30 of them this time. It's how is 30 people just getting infected and probably infecting a bunch more people not being covered at this stage? How is it still such a secret? I felt the architecture was really good in the university, though. It felt very Resident Evil. It's not what you expect from an actual university, but in the setting, it's exactly what I expect, It doesn't make a lot of sense, and that's good. Other than that, Leon being, in incredible shape for a serious alcoholic is... I mean, he's in, I think it's a hotel or a chalet or something he's in because there's a staff member there.
Yeah,
there's a bartender. So to the point where he has bought the entire bottle because it's on the table. So, that I work in that industry. That's not a thing that people don't come in and just buy an entire bottle of whiskey and then sit there and drink it. That's insane. But he's done that, and then Chris gets annoyed at him for doing the drinking. So he tells him off, and then he immediately pulls out like a full hip flask full of whiskey. So it's like, Leon, man, I feel it. Like, you've gone through a lot of stuff, but like, how are you such a functioning alcoholic? It's incredible. The man's incredible.
The deleted scene where he has to sober up must be something else to watch.
Oh my goodness!
We're gonna get to New York, but give me a week or so to get myself back together.
Yeah. The end of the movie happens, and he just looks at Chris and he's like, "What just happened?"
That would have been way more interesting, for sure.
And what really annoyed me about Chris and Rebecca in that situation is, you know, if we want to bring it into a real life kind of scene, Leon is sat there. He's obviously an alcoholic. He's hurting. People around him keep dying, and he keeps finding himself in situations where like insane stuff happens. Insane. Like, can you imagine if you went through that like 4 times? Like, you'd just be like, you would be Leon at that point. And he's like, I'm sick of this happening. And then Rebecca and Chris both say along the same lines at the same time. They're like, what are you talking about? And it's just like...
Especially funny considering Chris has been through exactly the same kind of stuff, so he should know how awful
And Rebecca enough as well.
Well, yeah.
You know, Rebecca went through Zero, then Resident Evil, then whatever other thing she's appeared in, you know.
Yeah.
The books or whatever, if they've happened. I don't know what the timeline is, but it's just like, don't ask him what he means. You freaking know what he means.
Yeah, it's especially funny because I watched Death Island after this again, and the villain in that even points out Chris is the guy who always like goes into a place with a new team and then a bunch of people die every time, and it's like, yeah, so knowing that, Chris should also be like, yeah, a little bit more compassionate about this, but whatever, we just need to get
he should refuse to work with
we need
people.
to get to the action scenes, so who cares, right?
He should just refuse to work with people. The only reason he ever hangs out with Leon, he's so selfish. The only reason he ever hangs out with Rebecca and Leon is because those are the proven people that don't die when he hangs out.
Can't die.
Yeah. Yep.
He's just like, I know who I need for this job, since I've got rid of all of the people that are expendable. Let's bring in these guys to do it for me. Jesus, Chris,
So
the villain of Resident Evil. Remember in Resident Evil 7 in 8 when they were like, Chris is going to be the werewolf and he's going to be the bad guy. Now I wish that was true. Chris is a terrible, terrible person.
Yes, thank you. Yep.
Chris, get ragged up.
Let's get to New York then, the final act of the film, the sort of last 30 minutes. I'm going to put my conclusion a little bit ahead here, or at least say that all of these issues and holes that we poked in it, I was having a much better time with watching this than I was anticipating. Judging from my previous experiences, I was like, do you know what? This isn't as bad as I remember it being. At least that's much true. But, I mean, I being that I felt somewhat positive about it, I don't know how you guys felt, because this is the point where it really all falls to pieces. So if you already thought it was bad, I mean, I don't know, what's keeping you sane? But by the time they get to, New York, and the outbreak occurs, and the storm on Arias's skyscraper or whatever, and we've got Rebecca in a wedding dress, and all of this stuff, it just becomes this insane like slideshow of stuff that makes no sense. I've got a bunch of notes, but I'll let everyone sort of go ahead a little bit. Steve, what did you make of the final act of Vendetta?
I'm going to be real, guys. My brain glazes over. Like, the second after that he injects Rebecca with the new and improved A virus, it's all like, oh, okay, here we go. It's time for action. You know, hit the streamers. Oh, look, they've got a motorcycle and a Humvee. Oh, it's very reminiscent of Resident Evil 6 all of a sudden. And then, you know, stuff happens. Zombies get shot. Some dogs murder one of Chris's professional, not red shirt team. like it's an unexpected super bio weapon. It's just a dog, for God's sake. And then, Leon casually blows up a highway. Why? Then all of a sudden I don't realise we triangulated Glenn Arias' position, but we know it's at Glenn Arias Towers at Pennsylvania Avenue or whatever the frig. So we have a John Wick shootout followed by the weirdest, most redundant, terrible firearm control fist fight in the history of Gunkata. Please, someone watch Equilibrium again and learn the correct lessons from that movie. My God. Shout out to Sonny Bowell, by the way. They did an edit of that scene to try and make it look less ridiculous. They can't make it look not ridiculous, but they can make it bearable. The build up to the quote unquote final boss, my brain just goes, you can hear the paste fall out of my ear and hit the floor. It's that kind of but also, Leon causes untold amount of property damage for 2 Cerberuses. So thumbs up, Agent 47 or whatever the frig he is these days.
Yeah, that's what I've got here. If nothing else, film was it had a nice pace to it up to this point. So we go from a nicely paced love letter to the series, if you want to call it that. We want to be a positive sort of outlook on it, to some of the most insane nonsense the series has ever done. And one of those is definitely the famous scene of Leon killing a bunch of people on the highway. There are cars that blow up that have nothing to do with what's going on. It's certainly just random people on the intersection and just blown up by a guy who started the movie crying about his latest squad of randos dying, and now he's sacrificing people on their way to work and random families coming home from vacation or whatever that is. It's just people dying in the highway, and he's kind of smirking about it. It's ridiculous. Adam, what did you make of the sort of towards the end of this film?
This is kind of where it went off the rails, and I had my biggest issue. Honestly, I'm kind of trashing the movie. In terms of it's only over an hour and a half. It's not too punishing to watch. It's entertaining in some points, but as a plotted movie, this is where it really kind of just becomes almost insufferable. For a start, a truck drives up and the first truck releases the gas. Then we cut to Chris and Leon finding out about it and trying to head into the city. And by this point, there's a dude that just has a heart attack, doesn't even breathe that stuff in, so that's cool. By the time you see the second one, they explode the second truck. You're shown the city and nothing crazy is happening. And I know you've been to New York, so I have a few times. And it's just that's not how it would happen. That first canister...
It's no one on the street.
Firstly, yes, New York is insanely busy. That first canister goes off and hits plenty of people. In 20 minutes in New York, this will just be an insane... You see people running down the streets, filling the streets after that first one goes off. But then when they cut to the second one, it's just there's cars driving peacefully. There's no one on the streets. It's New York would go crazy if something like that happened very fast. So that was a problem. And then go on.
I just wanted to say, speaking of New York, I just wanted to point out how much I laughed at the scene where it's Leon's got a bike. Look, he's going to do a jump over a hill. I'm yeah, New York City, the famously hilly city that it is. It's not completely flat or anything. Yeah. Where the hell did they get this giant San Francisco hill from? It's so weird.
Yeah, the hill of New York, Si. Come on, you don't know about that?
Sorry, I must have missed that one.
And then when they're talking about getting back up and stuff, and she's I think Rebecca says to Leon and Chris, the state police have been informed, but they'll take 3 hours to get there. I'm what? What? Firstly, the NYPD is really almost the freaking size of an army itself.
Well, yeah. They're really addicted to Bellatra right now. They're busy.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Just crazy. But yeah, one of the Cerberus just bites that dude's head off. His actual head just bites it off. That's crazy. And then the dogs keep up with Leon when he's overtaking cars, and the dogs are just yeah, we can run this fast. It's all good.
It's because they're type K BOWs.
Oh, okay.
And
Type K is a different kind, you see.
Oh, you're right. My bad. Yeah, because that's true. They are very different. Because when he shoots
different.
one of them and it actually dies on the road, a car proceeds to run over it, but flies up into the air spinning after it runs a dog over. Like, can you imagine suburban neighborhoods when it's like, oh my God, I accidentally ran over my neighbor's dog. I feel terrible. But it did total my car and I span 3 times. So, where's the blame going to really be placed here? It's like ridiculous.
Oh, man.
The worst thing, though, honestly, this is let's actually talk about this part of the movie because it kind of comes up here. And for me, it's the worst thing because it's really where I started to get confused about what was happening. Because Rebecca had said the virus is in everybody, right? Okay, I'm willing to accept that. I'm willing to accept the virus is everyone. But then everyone has to drink the infected water. He poisoned the Great Lakes or whatever. He did something to the Great Lakes. So that's the second part of the virus, right? Is now you got to drink the water. You've got the virus in you. You've got to drink the water. How do you know who's drinking the water? You don't, because it's just a sold bottle of water. So you just hope that there's enough people drinking the water that then you release the gas. So the gas is the trigger, but you need to have drank the water as well. Otherwise, what's the point of the water? So now
don't worry though. Don't worry, because in one of the screenshots of a screen that for some reason Leon and Chris were looking at on the helicopter, it says on there that the green trucks would come in if it became uncontrollable and cure everybody. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Trucks drive in and you release the gas. So the gas affects all the people that have drank the water. So you just have to hope that that's what happened. You have to hope, let's release the gas. Hopefully enough people in this area have actually drank this bottled water so that they activate, right? So then people activate. But then the people that are activated go and bite everyone, who then turn into zombies as well. So it's what's needed? Because the people that turned didn't drink the water. So is now the zombies that have the water and the gas have now created a contagious. I don't know, man.
Completely uncontrollable.
It's so many confusing steps to
absolutely.
It's just
when it's just we're transferred by bite, like most Resident Evil viruses are. It's okay, well, why don't you just do it to a few people and then just drop zombies in instead of all these extra steps?
Exactly.
That's the short version. It's so unnecessarily convoluted. And quite like you, I'm not necessarily sure that I understood what was going on. But to be fair, the movie doesn't seem to care.
It doesn't care
what's going on.
It's funny because earlier we were talking about when we were talking about the upcoming movie, we're talking about the onus on games and movies to tell their stories differently. Because in a game, you really don't have you obviously it's a longer experience, so you do end up getting a lot of exposition and stuff, but you don't necessarily have to. There are plenty of games where you can play without even caring about the story. And if you wanted to, you could play almost any of the Resident Evil games without caring about the story and probably still have a decent time with some of them. And a movie is very different to that. A movie can't just be here's what's happening, enjoy it. You kind of have to have that plot contrivance there. And it's funny because, the movies aren't doing a good job of portraying the games, maybe because they're trying to be too similar to the games in terms of you don't need to tell them a lot. You can just do this and this and this. It's we demand a little bit more when it comes to movies, I think. So it's just annoying to get thrown the scraps of this information, but not ever have a payoff where you actually learn about any of it. Why does Glenn Arias have a wedding room in his tower? The people who built that probably thought he was a little weird, I need a square room. Yeah, I need a square room that looks like my wedding.
Weird.
And I'm going to put boxes.
Because if you try and think at least a little bit about what's going on when they're actually in that building, he at the very least has one room that just has zombies in it ready to go. Like, I like the idea that he's just got rooms full of zombies behind locked doors, because he like opens a locked door and all the zombies spill out for Chris and then Leon to deal with. I'm like, so you're telling me you just have zombies just hanging out in your skyscraper, do you? Like,
and if that's the case, if that's the case
what was
as
the rest
well,
of it for?
why do you have gas and water and that just let the zombies out? It will happen so quickly. And then they're just like, he's
put one on the street.
Yeah. He's portrayed as this stable genius 1 second, and he's portrayed as this freaking insane guy, like with a weird. He's got all of his relatives in boxes, on the chairs at the wedding. They're still like zombies. As we see at the end of the movie, that virus can be completely cured. So he didn't cure his own family members because he has the cure. So he doesn't turn his family back to normal people. By what we've seen, it turns them all to regular people.
I think people would, if they would turn back, they're mostly blown to bits, I think is the implication. But I don't know, there is a hand.
Well, that's what I was going to get into. It's like, yes, I guess they're blown to bits, but then if that's the case, like...
Why are the boxes moving?
Why are they in boxes? Like, why not just prop their torsos up on your chairs?
Very, very fun point. And then, on the vaccine, by the way, this is one of the most egregious dumb things of the film, is that the fact that they could just cure this vaccine after the fact, and everyone that's already turned into a zombie is fine now, which is crazy powerful vaccine.
Imagine you are sitting there, you're eating your lunch, right? You're just enjoying your lunch. It's a normal day, whatever. White stuff starts to come from the sky, some sort of weird vaccine. You breathe it in, you're like, oh, okay. You look down, that 10-year-old boy, half eaten, is there. There's blood around your mouth. You've got a stomach full of flesh. And you're just like, I'm good. I'm good now.
Yep. Time to go and step off the bridge. Yeah, off I go. Like, the trauma of that vaccine is the
unbelievable trauma. Oh, I just ate my husband. Okay.
Silver lining, okay? Like, if we know about the current Resident Evil universe's idea of the T virus and exposure to it, or the A virus, or whatever, these people are now going to be the most longest living in the entirety of North America, okay? New York is now the healthiest city on the planet.
Then none of these people age anymore. Yeah, very good point.
Big Apple, more like Rotten Apple.
On that note, James, what did you think of the final act of this film?
So I'm so happy you brought all these things up, because they're all things I made notes on. Like, I was leading towards the end of the movie. I'll go into like the meat in a second, but leading towards the end of the movie, I was like, yeah, like these people, like they're just gonna wake up from eating somebody, or their arm being off, or have their face sloughing off because of decay, because this virus still decays people. Like their body, their organs and everything are they shut down. They're dead. They were dead. And these people were like this for hours. So then just coming back and being like, I think we focus in at one point, and I'll talk about him after this, but we focus in at one point on the homeless person who's walking along the street, and he gets like the silly spray or whatever it is comes out of the helicopter to cure him, and he's just fine. He's just walking.
Yep.
And it's like, nah, mate, you would not be walking. Like, everything's dead. You would be in a serious condition. And I know we're not meant to think too hard about these things, right? But there is a line, right? There is a line with that guy in particular. I found it really funny. I don't know why this scene was in here, but it made me laugh, and maybe it will make nobody else laugh. But I found it really funny when you see him for the first time just before the trucks come in, and he's just like rummaging through some rubbish bins, and then he sees the truck just parking up, and then he's like, let's go over to that truck. Why, man?
Yeah,
why are you going over to that truck?
He's like, there's a truck in New York, I'm gonna go check this out. Like,
it was so weird. Like, I didn't understand it. Yeah, and just like you, Adam, like I've put here, it has the same issues that Resident Evil 6 had, where it went too big and didn't know what to do. Like, if something got this big, there would be no way you keep this away from local or national government bodies. Like, but instead we're expected to believe that Chris, Leon, and Rebecca will save the day. Oh yeah, and the other two people, DJ and Nadia, I think.
Nadia.
Like they'll save the day. Like even as I say, like even in Resident Evil terms, this is stretching our expectations so much. You know, it's before all this happens, we get the biggest lore reveal in the entire movie, guys. Booby McBoobison says, "It's time, Dad." It's a very important piece of lore. Okay.
It's time, not Bane. I mean, Dad.
But yeah, I'm going to go through my notes quickly. I found it really funny that there was a reference to Independence Day in a poster for some reason on a building, and on it said "Inevitable Tomorrow," which I also found really funny. It was just little things like that made me giggle. This is more like a comedy than anything. Anthony Ishizuka, the of NYPD fame, because we saw him for a full 30 seconds try and shoot at a zombie and missing, like we did in Resident Evil 2 2019. You know, he just couldn't hit anything. Like Damien getting his head ripped off, really brutal. I liked him, but Chris has a team and they all have to die as a consequence. You know, it's
being
just
associated with him.
Yeah, exactly. He's in this
job.
mission. They have to die at the end of the day. Was Adam?
I said just part of the job, man.
Yeah, exactly. And while this is all happening, you have Glenn Wesker looking over New York as it's burning. You know, it's. I think that there was one thing that took me out of all the comedy of this, and it was they don't do it often because they normally hide stuff up with monster sounds, but it was the doggy death sounds. Like they really went a little bit too hard on the doggy death sound. It was a monster, man. This thing's running at like 80 miles per hour. It's a monster. It's nothing else. I don't care if you call it K-type. It's just make it a monster. I'd say another thing that was really funny was, when Gomez is fighting Chris for the first time in
Gomez.
Gomez.
I believe his name was Diego, but go on.
Diego Gomez, that's his full name.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So when they're fighting each other,
Diego, not a minority Gomez.
Right.
I love the bit where he puts his foot down, doesn't crush the flame grenade for some reason, but then it pans to Chris, and Chris is just as surprised as he is that there's a flame grenade underneath his foot. Like, it was like, wait, that had just happened? I can't believe it. I'd never done that before. This is a 1 in 100 speed run try. It was fantastic. Yeah, and we've already mentioned it, but the gun fu section on the roof, like it did look amazing in terms of just like an action scene, but man, it makes no sense for two well-trained gun users. Like, somehow Chris has also entered the hyperbaric time chamber here and is on level footing with Glenn for no reason within a couple weeks or something. It's 3 months, isn't it? I guess you could have trained, but
yeah, it's a few months.
Like, previously he got his butt whooped, and now for some reason he's just keeping, hit for hit up with Glenn, who, by the way, I don't know if it was actually mentioned more than like once that he was part of the CIA.
No, it's not really.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
Gone into properly. Yeah, I don't even know if it is in the movie. I have no idea.
Yeah, that
I
Is it airsoft gun law? Are we taking that into consideration?
Yeah. Oh boy, I haven't thought about that in a while.
See, I was like wondering why he was so good at fighting, and because when we first see him, he absolutely whoops Chris, and in terms of like Resident Evil canon lore, Chris and Leon are pretty much the best close combat fighters. Mm-hmm. So when he was like, he just wrecked Chris. It was very surprising. But yeah, I think that, because if I get into any more stuff, it would be BOW stuff, and character stuff. But yeah, I am, as everybody else, I do kind of like glaze over this finale section of the film because it all kind of rolls into, and this is quite common with these CGIs. There is at least one section where they just kind of, they tumble into each other, and they want to kind of blind you with spectacle and not think too much. But you need to at least explain what your movie is about before you do that. And they didn't do a great job of doing that in this one.
Yeah, some final notes from me on the endings. We have largely gone into all of it as we've gone along, but I did think it's on the gun fu stuff. Like, you're absolutely right in terms of the idea, the sort of implication that you're meant to read into, that Chris got his butt kicked and now he's good because he's trained in those few months and we just haven't seen it, is dumb. I mean, the gun fu stuff overall is stupid, and it comes out and kind of nowhere when it comes back, because it's not a big part of that original fight scene, but then it comes back in a big way. And I guess I could forgive the idea that maybe Chris can fight this way. He is the super duper special agent. The fact that both Leon and Chris can do it, I don't know, is kind of silly. And if we are going with the idea that, hey, Chris has learnt this specifically to combat Arias, who did it to him, then it's even more silly, The fact that Leon is kind of keeping up with it and doing it as well. That hallway fight scene, for what it's worth, the wrestling moves, that's very Resident Evil, and there's a bunch of groundwork stuff and sliding around. That's very Resident Evil 6. So in retrospect, it's not really out of step with what the series had been doing up to that point. But it felt really funny at the time, considering we just moved deliberately away from that kind of stuff a few months prior with Resident Evil 7. And now, we're bouncing back in the opposite direction again. Fun shout out to, again, another thing that hasn't actually come out at this point, but the railgun at the end was very much like the finger, which I thought was kind of funny. And Capcom, we talked about Leon and his motorbike, doing a deal with Ducati in this film, which is why it's got so much screen time, and why it is as big a character as Leon is, and it saves the day. Like, it's a big part of what takes down Arias at the end is Leon driving his motorbike into something.
My God.
So that's kind of hilarious. That Ducati is the real hero. There you go. That's everything I've got on the end of the story anyway. And now, reading the file, Spencer's letter from Resident Evil Village in character as Oswell E. Spencer, Honorable Hunter.
Dear Miranda, I apologize for not meeting you in person. I would love nothing more than to visit your quaint village once more. However, I am incredibly busy. Then again, I suppose for an immortal woman such as yourself, you no longer remember this poor half-dead medical student in the snow. I have always cherished the revelations I came to 15 years ago when I stayed in your village. I was inspired by your research. To think one could transform a human by infecting them with an organism. Positively visionary. I know that with that knowledge I could achieve my own vision for the next step in human evolution. Even after 2 world wars and humanity on the cusp of another, my conviction never wavered. I realize, however, through the many nights of intellectual talks with you and I shared, that your conviction differed from mine. You hoped to bring back a single dead person, while I aimed to change the world. Your experiment on the mold would have never aided me in my endeavor to achieve an exponential infection. I thought a virus would be more effective. This is why, my dear, I had to leave you. I will regret never telling you goodbye. My apologies for reminiscing. I actually have news that I thought might please you. I have found the key to evolution. The progenitor, a virus found in Africa. I plan to start a company with friends and colleagues, dedicated to the virus research. I will call it Umbrella, just like the symbol in the cave that we spoke about. I am one step closer to making my vision a reality. I hope you will be able to achieve your goal someday too.
You taught me so much, and for that, I will be forever in your debt. Sincerely, your lifelong student, Oswell E. Spencer.
Let's get into the characters, how they're portrayed and written. Written, we're using very loose speech marks. James, how did you feel about the characters?
We have mentioned it a couple of times already, but I wonder when higher ups or whoever else, tells Chris to go on these missions, or even Chris himself, is going to realize that wherever he goes, his teams will definitely die every time. It's a foregone conclusion at this point, unless he has a member of the original cast with him, in which case the spares may actually have a chance. Like on top of that, like him having the personality of a teaspoon doesn't help his corner ever. He's either dopey meathead or angry mood boy. Like there's no in between. Exactly the same as Leon. When Rebecca turns to them and says, "You're so alike." No, they're not. They're nothing alike. They're just like, Leon is this weird, I don't even know what he is. He's just not he's not Leon. That we know. He's too much like Chris, because I think that is a stereotype, that someone has fallen into and just can't seem to get out of for some reason. Like Leon is quite a nuanced character. It's like, especially, this is why we need like something to explain what happened after RE3, like an actual interactive adventure, a film, a series, something to explain what happened after that, because that's why there's a disconnect, because I just can't connect even RE4 Leon too much with the Leon from RE2. It's really hard for me to connect those two things up. And then like in contrast, Rebecca Chambers is consistently amazing in this film. Like, other than she's got some weak writing, but I think, it's the film's fault that. But a lot of her like really strong stuff is attributed to Erin Cahill, who voices her, does the performances for her. Like her cadence and personality is exactly what I would expect from the games in an event like this. And as I say, I refuse to comment further on this version of Leon. I just don't get why he's here. Like, other than the Los Illuminatus connection, which was literally inert. He was like he was clearly inserted in just to plant this man in that seat drinking that bourbon or whatever it was. That's all he was there for. All the other performances, they were fine. The villain trope is getting a bit long in the tooth now. And I realize this came out in 2017, but we've had another one since then.
Yeah.
So when I see one,
two if you count Infinite Darkness as well.
Right. Yeah. Actually. Yeah. Really great point. When you see one, you see them all. Unfortunately, when it's under Capcom, you can twist them to make them a bit more interesting. But Arias is no exception here. He, like Adam said it earlier on, like, I think it was Adam and you, Sai, like you were talking about Arias kind of about first being this stable villain, and then he just goes really cartoonish towards the end. Just like stick to one thing, Capcom or whoever's writing, just stick to one thing and get really strong with that instead. And then there were his team who will never appear in anything ever again.
Yeah. I would largely tend to agree. I think Rebecca's placement within a story, the damsel stuff perhaps aside, even more so because of Biohazard the Stage, which takes place directly before this also does it. Ugh. But other than that, it's really good, like how they use her, how they reintroduce her even. She, we mentioned it earlier, she's got that flirty side, the sassiness to her without going too far in that direction, and she can also react to a tight situation and get out of a tight situation as well. It was cool that was put on display. It's a shame that we don't see her military training really kick in, because there's a bit once she's vaccinated herself where she goes around a corner, and she goes around a corner backwards, which was really weird and kind of idiotic, and you wouldn't do that even if you didn't have military training, but she should absolutely know better. But there you go. Other than that, though, pretty strong. They used her well. It was fun to see her kind of get in Chris and Leon's faces, even if the reasoning is kind of dumb. And yeah, as we've said ad nauseum, Chris and Leon's characters sort of overlapping is dumb. Like, I wouldn't mind drunk Leon as a character, and Adam's absolutely right. Like, it's absolutely understandable. But the problem is, of course, that we've already gone through this just a few years prior, both in the lore and in the releases of Resident Evil, with RE6 doing drunk Chris. It's just kind of boring to tread that ground, especially if you're not going to say anything new, just not say anything at all. They just did it for the scene where, like, yeah, look at him, he's drinking whiskey, what a hard man, and then he's just back to quipping and blowing up civilians for some reason. So Kobayashi, not acting as a producer but as a supervisor for this, his boner for Leon is just hilarious to me. The slow motion walk intro and all that stuff is just, it's hysterical. That he's just a cardboard cutout caricature in this film. Definitely. Chris isn't a huge amount better, but I think I've said this before, and if not, I'm going to say it now. I really like Kevin Dorman as Chris. Like, he brings a certain amount of softness to Chris, which was nice, because he is kind of we've said it since RE1, he's kind of a dope, but he's just a bit of a soft touch idiot sometimes, which is nice. Like, I like that, but it's the one thing that separates him from Leon in both this and Death Island. Like,
I prefer him when he has that humanity to himself,
that sheepish smile and stuff. Like, yeah, absolutely. Which is a shame, because he doesn't really have a lot to do in this movie, which is really weird considering they clearly wanted Arias to be the new Wesker and stuff like that. And Arias, while I'm on that subject, really, again, also kind of hilarious for good and bad reasons. His meet Sarah moment where he hands over the dismembered hand of his dead wife to Rebecca is truly unhinged in the best way possible, which made me, in retrospect, as I say, I watched Death Island, was like, maybe I was too positive about Death Island, because Arias is way more interesting than Dylan. But there you go, because at least he gets that one fun moment of, look how cookie I am. But on the other end of it, him like mouthing off to Chris pre their final fight is also funny for the wrong reasons, because he's talking to Chris like they're like long-time rivals, and Chris doesn't even really know who the guy is. Like, he's like, I don't know who you are. Why are you yelling at me for? Like, I don't get it. Just do what you got to do. Let's have a fight. This isn't like, we haven't built up to this. Like, it's all over the place. Mixed bag. Doesn't feel like a good enough term. Rebecca good, everyone else mid to bad. Adam, how did you feel about the characters in the film?
I think I honestly would have preferred it if they had tried to do an original cast. I think it would actually be a lot stronger as a movie in that case, because we don't then need to fall back on anything, and really, let's look at the movie. There's no reason for it to be Chris, Leon, and Rebecca. How do they keep finding themselves in these freaking situations? Right. It would have been more interesting to have them as maybe, more of a command center kind of like role, overseeing some other people that were our main characters. I feel like I would have enjoyed it a lot more that way. But yeah, it's you're not getting anything out of this movie that you haven't gotten from the characters better elsewhere. So that's the problem, right? It's like, if we have better examples of these characters everywhere else, then there's no need for them to be in this movie, because they don't do anything that advances their character. They don't do anything that advances like their relationships with each other. They're just really cookie cutter. I feel like in the script or whatever, in the synopsis, they are all almost, Rebecca being the best, definitely having kind of a bit more meat in this. But really, they're all just like one little sentence things. This is what Chris is. This is what Leon is.
Yeah.
This is who Glenn is. There's like no depth whatsoever, and it really shows. So I feel like if we had at least had original characters, you can you have a bit more leeway. You can kind of be like, oh, this guy is this guy, and maybe we'll find out why. But it's like, when we already know so much, giving us this is not pushing them any further than they are. And as a result, I just feel like it's pointless.
Steve, any thoughts on the characters?
You know,
Any thoughts in English?
Back in the day when Resident Evil wasn't quite in the cultural zeitgeist that it tends to be these days, it used to get criticised for very, very poor writing. I feel like when it comes to this, it kind of rings very, very true. The characters of Leon and Chris are pretty much interchangeable action men. One is drunk, one is sad. They even look like they're brothers, for God's sake. Just swap the hair around, you won't be able to tell who's who. Rebecca, I like some of what's done with her. She does unfortunately get damseled, which kind of undermines the whole thing. Even if she does, quote-unquote, save the day and has the idea. This is going to sound out of nowhere, but out of all of the CGI films, excluding 4D Executor, Glenn Arias may be the best we've had it, which is awful to think about. Like, he's a fun combatant to watch him fight Chris in that first fight scene, not the second one. Don't at me.
No, you're right. You're completely right.
He also doesn't hit the Willy Billy button and immediately become a G-Virus monster. He does it at the brink of death as a last resort, not I'm going to just inject myself for the lull of it. Like most Resident Evil villains do. He could have potentially crawled away and come back, but no, he turned into a boss and had to die.
Excuse me, Steve, I always wonder how they know that's going to happen.
The contingency plan.
Yeah, like your contingency plan is to tell a big guy to unleash whatever, like he's got his own ability to like smash the restrictions that are stopping. I don't even know what virus he has. It's something else, I guess. He smashes his own restrictions, at which point his back opens up into a big mouth thing, and then two like tentacle things come out and shoot weird goo all over Arias. And then the next thing you see is like they're melded together, and it's like, how is that a contingency plan that you can even know how it's going to happen? Has it happened? Oh man,
has it happened before and they've been unsewn together by lady who has two speaking lines? Let's just assume the obvious. Yes. It's. I mean, even the poor cameraman gets webbed. So there's three people in there when you think about it. But he had a plan. He had a reason for the plan. He tried to execute the plan. And if it wasn't for the Scooby Gang, he would have actually succeeded, despite the fact he's absolutely mental. That's really all there is to it, unfortunately. He's the only character who has any motivation in the movie other than, I am from Resident Evil. Hi, I do these things. As for the XCOM squad, they're okay. They literally have, like, no personality between them other than, like, there's a book nerd, there's a sassy nerd, there's a pilot, and there's a girl with a massive rail gun. All right, yeah, cool. This is literally an XCOM squad. By the way, I've remembered his name, the most important man, the man that galvanized Leon in this whole mission. His name is Petruchio.
That's it.
Yeah, there you go. You didn't think I remembered, but I did.
He was a character.
He was a character.
He had a family.
Arm blown off, had more sympathy.
He had a wife and a child.
He had a family.
There are so many things wrong with this, and I cannot stress it enough. This is still somehow the best we've had it.
Yeah, let's talk about BOWs then, Steve. We'll go ahead and talk about the monsters in the movie. I guess we have the zombies, Diego, Maria, and some, I guess, zombie sort of different versions, like we mentioned, like the sort of weird thing at the beginning and a child zombie. Also, yes, Glenn and Diego's fusion tyrant and the Cerberus. What did you think of them?
The Cerberus can run at like 80 million miles an hour and keep up with the car now, so that's kind of terrifying. But they look stock. Yeah. But they are they're just, that's, poor, what's his name? The guy who got decapitated, James, what was his name?
Was it DJ?
No, that was the last film.
Damien.
Right, Damien, literally, it just Joseph Frost homage. Just, okay, cool. The zombies seem to lose power as the film progresses, I noticed. They were almost overpowering Chris and the military dudes at the start of the film, and then they become almost slow motion punching bags and bullets. They're not. The second it all kicks off in New York, they just don't seem to have any of the stopping power they once had. Ragdolling punching bags that eat each other and then get up and they're perfectly fine afterwards. That being said, the tyrant, the quote-unquote tyrant of the film, I dig it. It's got like extractable claws. It goes, Diego! That even has a glowing weak spot. It's very much an homage beast. But it's nowhere near as compelling as the previous film's tyrants, who literally sandwich lickers. It's a mixed bag. It's. I don't want to say stock, but it kind of is.
Yeah, do you know what? The inclusion of the Cerberus itself is very stock to me. Like, no, we need something other than zombies. Zombie dogs, right? Yeah, okay.
Oh,
and what we said about the beginning of the film being an RE1 homage as well. It was so painfully obvious.
The torso with agility stats in like +10. That's easily a liquor in every other film.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's shocking that we didn't just get an outright liquor appearance, because it seems to be the way, which is a real shame, because even though it goes absolutely nowhere, but the mention, just the mere outright mention of Los Illuminados and the Plagas, this would have been the perfect chance to bring back an RE4 BOW, which is they usually all restricted just to that one game and never get another appearance. But the fact that it's outright said that Glenn has been working with the cult, we could have had a Navista door if you want something speedy, or some Navista doors. Or something for the bike chase, or really you could have done anything. There's so many cool stuff that you could have brought back for a unique thing for this movie to make it memorable, in the same way that people go, oh, this is the Rebecca movie. They would have gone, oh, this is the insert RE4 BOW of choice movie. The fact that it's Cerberus is really damn disappointing. And Damien's head literally flying off is so dumb. Everyone else is pointing out. I just need to +1 to that. Very stupid. But I do agree about the Tyrant. The glowing weak spot's really nice, and I like the fact that he climbs on top of a helicopter. It's a nice Survivor reference, obviously. Good stuff. Big fan of that. Adam, what do you think of the BOWs in the movie?
I think they're all pretty passable, but like people are saying, it just goes back to that idea of, like, it's kind of tired, I think, now. Like, the zombies were a little different, a little more agile. It could somehow be controlled. That's never really explained how that's happening. Like, what, because we've seen with the Las Plagas, there is, like, I assume it's the staff, like the control beast kind of staff that he has. And that's controlling everything. There's, like, a little explanation there, at least something. Whereas this, there's no explanation whatsoever. And to the point where at the very beginning of the movie, Kathy, the zombie, she has a name for whatever reason. She's in like a manacle, like a chain around her neck, and she's just like chilling and walking with the rest of them. And then he like lets her go, and she becomes like zombie-like. But then he walks by her and she stops. So is it like just him? Like, I don't really get it. It's annoying. The dogs, very annoying. Like you said, it could have really been anything else. And it's like, now we're just throwing Cerberus in because it's Cerberus and they're in the movies and they're kind of like a famous Resident Evil monster, But there's no real reason for that. It's the A virus, which is its own thing. Do the dogs have the A virus? Why were there just 2 dogs in the back of a van? That's a good point. Seemingly already Cerberus. The Tyrant was fine,
They were driving the van, Adam.
That's true. Sorry, my bad. The weird little spine creature that could have been a licker. It's just weird. It's like, why was that there? What is that? Why is there only one of them? Was that the reason they were in the mansion? Because of like some weird BOW? But then it's not really. No, the reason's because like the kid and the woman. So it's like,
yeah, they were looking for Kathy.
Who freaking knows? So it just. It's fine. It's just a little lazy, I think. It's acceptable. It's fine. I'll watch it. It's not exciting. But if you think about Resident Evil and all these different viruses that we have now and the depth of lore that we have, like in these movies especially, because no one's just coming and watching Resident Evil Vendetta, like people will just come and watch the main movies, because they're like action blockbusters. You don't have to like be into Resident Evil to know they exist, but really, like in your day to day, are you finding out about Resident Evil Vendetta? Probably not. It's very niche, and there's a real great gold mine there of making some stories that I'd love to see like an anthology series where it's like every story's different and it delves into a different thing. And you don't have to have Chris, and you don't have to have Leon, and you don't have to have Rebecca. There doesn't have to be a tyrant. There could be. I'd love a series that has one creature in it. Like a show where it's just like, what is this one creature, and like finding out about it. And I think that this is like an exercise that can happen here, but it just doesn't. It's just lazy, Ryan.
I think lazy is being generous, to be honest, as has been mentioned about Diego, who can fusion dance with Arias for some reason to become a tyrant, and Maria as well, that they're not explained at all in terms of the virus or their mutation or what's going on there. Are they superpowered humans? It's not even really explained that they're from his wedding party so much. Like, it's obviously implicated by a photo of them pre-mutation, but it's just they just designed some monsters for him to have as bodyguards, and that's as far as the logic went, which is extra funny considering Maria does carry on into Death Island for some reason. It's just nonsense. James, what do you make of the BOWs?
Yes, I can be a bit more positive here.
Good.
So I'll pick up on what I said at the beginning about the torso creature. So there's several creatures in Southeast Asian folklore, and based on like where Resident Evil is developed and the animating studio here, they look like walking torsos, or they can float, or they can extend themselves. Like there are literally like 50 different names, but the ones that are the most common are Teki Teki or the Karusu, sorry. And what I found interesting is these things are typically spirits of revenge, which isn't super original, but with this, I found it quite funny or interesting. The movie's title is literally, Vendetta. So I was wondering if they just wanted, if someone, wanted to put their own little kind of mark on it, by putting that creature in there. Because it is a little bit out of left field, that it's there. But yeah, I did find it was quite fitting. I loved the way it moved. I wanted to, even though it was quite violent, I wanted it to be a bit more violent, because these things, based on folklore, they can be quite brutal in how they get their victims. Yeah, so I want more of that. Like, I do have bias, but I want to know more about it. At first I thought it was Kathy when I first saw it.
Right, same.
But then we got that reveal moments later. I think if it was Kathy, that would have been a cool connection. It would have gave them a way to expand on that if they wanted to, instead of the iPad image and then her in chains. But yeah, that's my little bit about the Karusus. If you wanted to look them up, just look up Teki Teki, which is Teke, then that again, and you'll see a bunch of stuff. Yeah, the dogs in this movie are, and again, I'm going to be generous, they are incredible in comparison to what we've seen. Their code name is K-Type. They didn't want to use the name Cerberus. They're clearly faster, they're stronger, maybe smarter, than other Cerberus we've seen, even though they look no different. I will say that they do, and this is going to go on to a point as well in a second, they do mention that each of these trucks comes with a van that has 2 K-types in it on one of the PC screens, in case they are surrounded. And the K-types we're going to be used as enforcers, which again is so dumb. Because they're not really enforcers, are they? They're more I don't know, multi murderers. Yeah, and this is the most interesting thing. I actually just looked this up myself because I remembered something when you spoke about when Diego, or was it Adam, spoke about Diego doing his fusion with Arias. So yeah, we have these black sheep BOWs with Maria and Diego Gomez. Maria being the clear sex appeal and nothing else in this movie. Yep.
It's Jill from RE5 if she stayed evil, right? I think that's the vibe they're going for.
I was definitely feeling that. Or the creepy lady from Revelations.
Oh, sure, yeah.
What was her name? I can't remember her name. Jessica? No, that was
Rachel.
Rachel. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. But yeah,
so
like
Jessica is creepy. To be fair, just saying.
she is. I mean, she wears just one, wetsuit leg. That's just creepy in itself.
Weird.
But yeah, and then you got like Diego Gomez, the big punchy boy, and unfortunately, that is as far as their lore goes. Mm-hmm. Like, other than Maria being Diego's daughter and both working for Arias, that is it. And their designs are really evocative. They're really interesting. But this is not the first time Capcom have like created really cool designs like this, and it makes people want to ask questions and then just do not explain anything at all. And then what makes it even worse, hilariously, is again, we've mentioned it before, but Maria's in Death Island, and it is equally pointless in that movie as well. It's kind of wild. But yeah, to back on to what I said right at the beginning, interestingly, Diego, when he puts those white tendrils out, there's actually an animal in our world that does that, precisely like that, and it's called the ribbon worm. And it does that to capture. It's known as a proboscis, but it isn't what we would see as a proboscis, but it puts it onto marine life, and it captures it like in a net and then brings it into itself. Interesting. And it's exactly like that. Exactly like if you put white tendril worm, it will come up on Google with the ribbon worm. What's really kind of annoying and frustrating is that they could have explained that and actually given some really cool lore on it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking like
tinfoil hat time. Just to indulge me a sec, James. Tinfoil hat time. Now,
go ahead.
We don't really know what Las Plagas' involvement was. Like, generally speaking, they're just part of Glenn's scheme somehow. I'm guessing controlling monsters. If anything, I'd say that there's a control beast inside Diego, and that's probably why all these weird tentacle things are.
Interesting.
Yeah, maybe.
Las Plagas just franchised. He opened a franchise.
Lay McDonald's.
Yeah.
I tell you what, one thing that would be really cool, and it would be good for people like us who like to, we'd love to dive into stuff like this, and like we get it in games. It would be cool to just have a lore room. You could have a lore room where everybody's going around the room, and they don't even have to go through the documents.
They could just screen for a bit.
Yeah. And we'll be like, oh, wow, we can be here for hours looking up this stuff, And it's not like that is even that, like, it's not that expensive to produce. It's just like, oh, we just need a couple of writers. You just need to write a couple of pages for this type, whatever it is. Right. We'll just put it on paper and we'll just give it to the viewers so they can look into it and connect it to the universe. Something like that doesn't necessarily need to be a lore room, but like something like that would be really cool for stuff like this, where I was assuming they just don't have time or they don't have the budget to explain these things. Instead they over explain and then they kind of bite themselves in the butt with it. I do like the same with Steve, and I think we've all kind of had the similar opinion that like I really did. I feel like they pulled all the stops for the Gomez Arias hybrid tyrant thing. I think maybe hot take. I think it may be the best looking tyrant in any of the CGIs.
Yeah, okay.
There's tons of detail on it. It's effectively gross to look at. Yeah. And it's got some great sound effects. Like there's one particular thing that's kind of always in my mind with him, and it's when he uses his spiny finger thing, where he shoots them out. When he does that, you get the sound like cables, wind going through cables. There's that's just one sound that I've kind of really loved, because it's like now you get kind of an idea of what his little spike finger things were made of. They're kind of very, very metallic in material. That's cool environmental storytelling. And to finish it off, I didn't really know whether to put this into BOWs or characters. But the one thing that slightly bothered me with this movie is the likeness between Rebecca Chambers and Sarah, Arias' wife. There's definitely doppelganger folks, like without any blood connection in our world. But in this universe, especially as this takes place after RE6, where there's gene splicing, I expected more of an explanation other than just because.
It's a coincidence.
You know, exactly. I wanted more.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Okay. You've mentioned some audio cues there, which nicely sets us up to talk about our sort of last subject in terms of dissecting the movie, which is the way that it looks and the way that it sounds. I think that, I mean, we talked about the head coming off. We talked about the cheese wire stuff. And there was a couple of other bits as well. I think somebody's hand comes off or something. For me, I thought all that stuff it's kind of visceral, but even more so because it's kind of out of place with the rest of the movie for me. Because the tone of the film is quite clean visually. It's not like the griminess of Resident Evil Damnation, for example. So I didn't feel like it fits. It feels really odd. Like if there was more blood splatter and, use of lighting and stuff and making it look closer to a horror movie where stuff like random dismemberments and those kinds of things are normal or more commonplace, I guess, they would fit in, but they felt really out of place for me. Overall, though, the visuals I thought were, a step up over Damnation, as they should be. There's a few years in between. And the direction we talked about how New York was weirdly empty and stuff like that, and the outbreak made no sense, but I did think that some of the opening shots of New York zombie apocalypse was quite good, like the bird's eyes or overhead view of the outbreak spreading was kind of neat, but they could have gone really much further with it. In terms of the audio, I think the cast is largely does a decent job. I think everyone pulls their weight with what they're given. Certainly, I don't think anyone's outright terrible. Maybe some of the Breaking Bad dialogue between the random soldiers is kind of hokey and their performances isn't super good, but again, what can you do with that script? But in terms of the core cast, I think Kevin Dorman, Erin Cahill, Matt Mercer, they will do a really good job with what they're given, and the music is just kind of largely perfunctory. It's just kind of there, with the sole exception largely being, for me, there's a moment in the university where zombies smash through a window while Rebecca's trying to hide, and she hides under the table and such. And the music that plays kind of had the video game vibes for me. It felt like, one of the panic pieces of music that you got in the classic games, which I thought was kind of neat. But other than that, audio-wise, it was suitable, and I have no opinions on really any of it. Adam, how did you feel about the way the film looks and sounds?
I pretty much echo your sentiments there, Si. The soundtrack didn't strike me really at all. It was completely serviceable, but and the incidental sound effects were also serviceable. The voice acting was fine, like you say, a little shaky in a few areas, but I can understand that it's obviously a lot harder to voice act like an animated movie, when you're not physically on a set or anything like that. So I give them some leeway for that. I think that, like you were saying, with like the weird kind of gore parts, I think the reason why that was so weird is it was always so incidental.
Yeah, that too.
Like when the restaurant / bar / hotel, whatever it is getting shot up, there's just a cut to the server facing a brutal death, and one of her arms gets shot off, and then that's it. It's like, oh, there was the server that was there for a second. She had a brutal death. And then, Damien as well is like one line of dialogue maybe, and then Chris is standing there. Chris is kind of the point of we're watching him get his head bit off, like from Chris. So it's more for Chris than it is for Damien. So it's all these it's all these points of horrible brutality where we don't. It's just shock, It doesn't. Damien getting bitten to death by that dog, he doesn't need his head torn off. It makes no difference. The server getting her arm blown off makes no difference. You don't need to see her arm be detached by a gunshot. They're just adding these little elements of gore where they won't they would never dare to do that to a main character, and they probably can't. It's just, I think it's a little weak. But overall, I thought it was, like I say, this movie and the soundtrack and the effects and the characters and the VOWs, I would say just okay. It's just okay.
With the decapitation thing, I literally had to rewind it and watch it again. It was just kind of there, blink and you miss it sort of thing with no gravitas to it. I was like, did his head just come off? Yeah.
In my mind,
okay, sure.
In my mind, I feel like the head came off and bounced off the back of the truck door and fell down, and it made me laugh, but it might not have actually happened like that.
It doesn't look like it, though, to be fair. Steve, what did you think of the visuals and the audio in the film?
Pretty much the same. I've already said how I feel about the brothers Winchester, or Chris Redfield and Leon Kennedy, look very similar. Generally speaking, I depending on the context of the situation, like, I really do like the idea of that fiber wire trap. That I thought that was horrific. I know it was meant to be a laser trap march, but I thought it was done in a way that was slightly different, very George Trevor if he lived in the 2000s. That kind of vibe. That being said, everything else is ridiculously over the top. Like, yeah, I can appreciate we need to have Sarah's arm for the lore of Glenn Arias' madness, but that doesn't mean other people need to lose their arms. Poor lady, that waitress getting annihilated by a minigun, bit over the top. It's strange how the zombies don't seem to get much in the terms of the actual being blown to bits part. Like, that whole gunfight in the elevator hallway feels tame compared to what some of the living people go through. That being said, we do see an entire torso disembowel three guys. So, yeah, it like everyone said, it's a mixed bag. Musically, I feel like there are motifs to pretty much everything RE6 had. Like, not necessarily the actual tracks, but it feels like that's the vibe they're going throughout the film. And it's okay. Like, again, no real bangers. Nothing's jumping out at me. The only thing I can think of is like some violent violin strings when Glenn's like going, "Look at this rifle that I could butt you with." Ooh, that's it. That is literally it. Which I feel is par for the course with the 3D, the CGI films. Unfortunately, I don't think any single one of them have really dropped a banger on us, have they? Like,
I don't know. Having rewatched Death Island, the opening theme song's pretty cool.
Oh, that's cheating, though, isn't it?
It is. It is. Yeah, the rest of it's just might as well not be.
Even Casualty has a banging opening theme tune, so that doesn't really. Yeah. So unfortunately, stock acceptable, nothing really memorable.
James, final thoughts on visuals and audio for Vendetta?
CGI was top notch. Really smooth animations, detailed environments, action scenes, like the Gunfu rooftop battle, and I agree with Steve, that first fight with Chris, though I love seeing Chris get his butt kicked, to be honest, but that first battle was really cool to watch. There was one particular bit where Arias is standing there just with the gun, which, I think in any other case, it would look ridiculous. But the way he was standing with that gun looked really intimidating. And it was really well done, like in shot. It was a wide shot, and he was holding it low with the barrel pointing up towards Chris's head, even though he was not intending to shoot him. He was just intending to teach him a lesson. It was cool and unique. The choreography was really well done. I think and the cinematography as well. Like this type of animation, I think, is my favorite. Like, it's because everything felt very natural. Like, their facial expressions felt natural. The movements felt natural. Nothing felt too awkward, like nothing felt janky or anything. Like, you get a really good feel of it during that hallway scene where, a lot of the movements were just really silly and very like kind of Marvel Avengers, where you put like 5 more moves into it when you didn't need to. But or like Liam Neeson in Taken, I think I mentioned this before, where there's a joke with Taken with him when he goes over a fence, and there's like 8 different cuts of him jumping over a fence. Like, and that's how I feel like a lot of the action was. But the action itself was really good. Yeah, I've mentioned this before, but I love the shot of Glenn looking over the burning city of New York. The wide shot. It was such a Wesker-like moment, and clearly meant to be a Wesker character, and it was exactly what they're going for. And what he was wearing was very similar to what he wears in RE4, the reimagining, which was really cool. The music, I think, the music and sound is always good in these CGIs. Like, I think when I say good, I mean they're not mid and below. They're always all right. You know, they never really miss. Like the music, it does a fantastic job of like building tension. You mentioned earlier, Si, that scene in the lab attack. You hear those tense strings starting at a really low volume, and it gave me like RE2 vibes.
Yep.
The sound design, as usual, like overall, the visuals are perfect. Love the sound design. But yeah, I wish. Yeah, actually, I've lost my train of thought. Yeah, the sound design overall was great, complemented the visuals perfectly, and yeah, it made the action feel immersive, even though they went a little bit too over the top. Sorry, I skipped there. My brain had a fart.
I'm really glad that you did compliment there, like the choreography and stuff like that, and the general direction is good. Like, for what it's worth, we poo-poo the ridiculousness of the gun fu and all that stuff, it at least looks good and comes together well for the most part. Like, it's kind of, even if you are kind of watching it to laugh at how ridiculous it is, it looks good, it's fluid, and the general direction is pretty solid overall. That to give it its flowers, certainly yes. And as we move into sort of final conclusions, as I said earlier, I enjoyed this a lot more than I was expecting to, and I wonder if it's just because I knew what I was getting into. So, sure, whatever, let's watch a dumb action movie with a plot doesn't really mean anything. And in that case, I think the visuals and the choreography and just the general direction really do help to make it. And the fact that, as I said earlier, the first sort of hour is decently well paced before we get to the crazy end where nothing really has that much weight to it. That helps as well. There are various things that go into this being a nice, punchy 90-minute movie. If you don't think about it at all, it's a treat for the eyes, if you like. But let's get deeper into our conclusions. Adam, what are your final thoughts on Resident Evil Vendetta?
I think it's for like a no-brain movie to watch. It's serviceable. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It's got some fun set pieces in it. I think the average person would enjoy it just fine. I don't think they'd get a lot of thinking material out of it. It's not one that you can have very deep conversations about. But I think it's completely serviceable on that. Now, obviously, stepping up to the level of us, where we're kind of reading into it more, we have more knowledge of the characters, of the backgrounds of previous, things that they've done. That's where it really falls apart. And that's what's, I think, most disappointing about a lot of these projects is, like, you see certain things, say, like, I don't know, I haven't watched all of it, but Netflix is The Witcher. Like, it feels like they really care about, from what I've seen of it, I haven't watched it all, but I think I've seen all of the first season. And it felt like they really cared about the universe and getting little nods in and doing a lot with it. And I feel like we've never really had a Resident Evil project that's done that. Like, there's been nods, but they're normally pretty heavy-handed. They're not like a subtle, oh, did you see that thing he's got? Like, that's a specific thing. Without being like, oh, it has traces to Las Plagas, and you're just like, okay, thanks. So I wish that we would get something a bit more like that, honestly. And I don't see, in the day and age that we have of, like, movies and TV, there's no reason we don't get that. So realistically, everything that we do get that isn't that is always going to come off as a little disappointing, I feel.
Yeah, that's very well said, I think. James, what are your final feelings on Vendetta?
I'll start it how I'll finish how I started. Like, this, it is an RE movie I watched the most. And it is mostly because of Rebecca Chambers. her performance in it, etc. Like, although she is dragged down by the writing, but so is everybody else, unfortunately. But yeah, it is exactly how I see Rebecca Chambers in the game. She's capable, intelligent, in her element. However, I will always dislike it when women are used, as they are in movies like this, as simply wives to be wifed. And it always makes me cringe when that plot starts in this movie. But overall, despite this really huge negative review of it by me, I do enjoy it a lot for its set action pieces and Rebecca and everyone else can do one, Leon especially.
Yes. On that note, then, I'll go, because I have a very similar feelings in some way. Like, I'm going to be a little bit facetious at the top, but the film ends with the line, "How much longer can we keep on going like this?" And it has been 10 years of lore since this film came out. 2014 it's set. We're in 2025 now. And, you know, putting 7 and Village to the side for a moment, because they're kind of a separate thing. Let's face it. If we're moving forward into 9, potentially with the BSAA storyline, and we have got the end of the Winters family, then 7 and Village are kind of feel a little bit weird in terms of how they're weaved into the grander series. So in that case, since Vendetta came out, we've had 2 entries into the series in the form of a CGI movie and a CGI Netflix series, which I never want to watch again. So, yes, I keep asking myself the same question. How much longer can we keep on going like this? Because it's just stupid. This is what Resident Evil has become, where it's like these self-contained stories where we come up with a new virus that we don't properly explain. We do homages to all the old stuff, and we don't really move anything forwards. And we don't move anything forwards because we've had, as I say, 2 entries in 10 years worth of lore. But there you go. And look, I always thought I would feel that Vendetta would be one of the weaker movies. But having rewatched it, like I said, I came out of this far more positive than I expected, even though we spent the last 2 hours absolutely crapping on this movie. I do wonder if it's because I'm yearning for more Resident Evil, since it's been quiet for a couple of years now. I don't know, it's weird. I really appreciate how novel this is now that we have had 7 and Village, which I love, by the way, the fact that the series did that. But it is interesting that this came out after Resident Evil 7, and this part of the series has laid largely dormant, with the exception of CGI projects. And I think I've said before, I've developed a pang of nostalgia, or something like it, for parts of the bioterrorism and BSAA era of Resident Evil. So this is quite a digestible version of that, if, as we've said, you sort of just turn your brain off and watch the fun visuals and smile and nod at the fact you get to see Rebecca on screen and stuff like that. It's certainly a movie of 2 halves, or I guess 2/3, and a last really dumb third. Steve, what are your final thoughts on Vendetta?
We live in a post-Fallout world, so I can now say this and slightly be wrong. But despite how critical I've been of this entire film, I feel like I've been, much like Sai, much like Adam, much like James, just been crapping on it all over. In terms of media that is attached to an established game franchise as a spin-off, it's probably still one of the stronger ones. And like, I'm unfortunately one of those people who have seen the Dead Space CGI films, animated films, and other tie-ins like that. You know, unfortunately, yes, I have seen Infinite Darkness. There's podcasts on it. And even worse, I've read Infinite Darkness. Like, you know, compared to them, this is an Oscar winner. Like, it's got an actual plot. It's got a villain whose nonsense plan is nonsense, but you can understand why it's nonsense. Like, it's got characters you recognise blowing up highways for some reason. Also, Damien's there. Rest in peace. But no, like, if you want...
Rest in 2 pieces.
Yeah, so he's here and he's over there as well.
If you want a bit of Resident Evil wallpaper that's got a bit of, like, you know, noise that's enjoyable, you could do worse than Resident Evil Vendetta. And plus, Rebecca is in it and is consistently on character, much like everyone else says. Like, this could have probably been stretched out into a Revelations game, but I'm kind of glad it isn't, because everything else about it is nonsense.
Yeah.
But yeah,
well,
yet still somehow better than the worst.
Yeah, and that is the worrying part, isn't it? Nothing else remains for me but to thank the panel, our contributors, and our community. Join us on the First Aid Spray Discord server to hear the show early, and check out our merch store or our Patreon to support the show. Don't forget that these and our social media links can be found at faspraypod.com. You can listen to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and all good podcasting apps. And if you like what you hear, please do leave us a review where you can and spread the good word. In the next episode, we'll be celebrating 25 years of Resident Evil Code Veronica in our own twisted way as we review one of the most under-discussed entries in the series. It's Resident Evil Survivor 2 Code Veronica. Thank you to the panel. You can follow us all individually. We're on Blue Sky now at SciWhite. Steve is at FB Steve. James is at Moist Owlet OFF. And finally, thank you for listening and have a good week. Yep.
That's right.
That's how we know it's actually happening. That's what makes it real.
That's how you know it's live. You have to say the blah 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 spell.
I mean, that's just how you calm the baby down. That is just.
Gee, Steve, you need to stop talking about children all the time.
No, unfortunately, it's a side effect of this. Yeah.
I'm just messing with you.
I
Make that noise
know.
too much, you'll wake up, and then we'll have a special guest. Two special guests, in fact. First Aid Spray, the next generation.
God. I mean, she's already got the Picard haircut, so
She could probably work the computer better than me right now, so it's fine.